But first, yet more warning signs today that the Albanese government's huge global warming plans to replace our coal-fired power, they are in huge trouble. It's so bad that we'll be paying a lot more money for a lot less electricity, possibly even blackouts. You just look at this month. People in New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia even, they're going to be hit with yet more increases in their power bills, more, and this time of around 25%. And last night on the ABC, I found this interesting. Energy Minister Chris Bowen, for the first time I can recall, sounded less like an Energizer bunny and more like a man who suddenly realises things are falling to pieces around him. You listen to this bit. It's, you remember Labor promising, of course, to cut your power bills, so that's an absolute joke. Even the ABC host last night wasn't buying Bowen's best tip to now cut your costs.
How can families best protect themselves against these rising prices? What should they do? You can reduce your power bill very substantially by putting solar panels on your roof. Batteries are very expensive. That's assuming you've got the money to put those panels on your roof.
But Chris Bowen still doesn't dare admit that his grand plan to replace most of our coal and gas with wind and solar power in just 7 years is now in tatters, and it must be dumped before this disaster gets worse. Bowen was still sticking to his lines, to his plan last night.
Our plan to take renewables to 82% of the grid, which is great for the climate and great for bills as well.
But the idea that we can do so much, turn to 82% renewable energy, wind and solar by just 2030, do it so fast, it's plainly insane. I mean, you just look at electricity use this morning. In New South Wales, for instance, I saw that almost all of it was from coal and gas, and that's after we've spent billions and billions on green power. You look at Queensland, same story. Is Labor really going to get rid of almost all that coal and gas in just 7 years from now? And then replace it with what? That would give reliable 24/7 power. And that's when we come to the fresh signs today of something that many power companies and retailers have actually been warning for months, that all the renewable energy projects that Bowen was counting on to take over as our last coal-fired generators forced out of business, look, they're just not being built fast enough, and they won't be. 2 new examples today of Bowen's plans falling to bits or causing more harm than good. Well, I'll talk in a second to experts about both. But the first is a warning that Snowy 2.0, that giant renewable energy scheme promised 6 years ago by Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, didn't we tell you it was going to be a disaster? Well, it's in fact blown out so much already, around 10 times the promised price, and is so bogged down and is so dodgy that maybe it's time now to just dump it. The other sign of trouble is that the government's plan to build 10,000 kilometres of new electricity wires to hook up all those planned new wind and solar farms the government hopes that it needs to take over to power our economy. Look, they're running into huge opposition from landowners, really slowing it down, adding to the cost. Opposition from farmers in New South Wales, for instance, who are furious their farms are being crippled by the huge transmission lines, even being compulsorily acquired some of their land, and they want more than the compensation on offer, which was already $200,000 per kilometre, and sometimes much more, double. $200,000 compensation per kilometre. When the government wants to build 10,000 kilometres of lines, you figure the cost of that, plus of course the legal delays. And all this and much more helps to explain why the Australian Energy Market Operator now estimates that replacing fossil fuels is actually going to cost Australia around $320 billion by 2050. And that's almost certainly an underestimate. $320 billion. And remember, that's to give us less reliable and more expensive green electricity, and to make no difference that anyone can measure to a climate that I've shown isn't even in crisis. This really is the biggest public policy disaster in our lifetime.